of Hinton respectfully acknowledges that it is located on the First Peoples traditional lands. We recognize this traditional territory to show respect and understanding to those who walked this land since time immemorial. Today, we uphold our ongoing responsibility to work together in the spirit of the intent of the treaties with all the First Peoples and nations that call this place home. The town expresses gratitude for the opportunity to build a better community on these sacred lands for generations to come. And with that, I'd like to call this meeting to order at 4 o'clock. Council, any additions or deletions to today's agenda? Seeing none, administration.
Nothing from administration.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. With that, council, I'll entertain a motion. Councillor Laberge.
Move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Laberge. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? That's passed unanimously. That'll bring us to our council minutes for adoption. Any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that we accept the regular meeting of council minutes for November 15th, 2022. Committee of the whole meeting, November 18th and 19th, 2022. The special meeting of council meeting, November 22nd, 2022, and the committee of the whole meeting for November 29th, 2022, please.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, we have a motion to adopt the minutes. Any further debate, questions? If you can go in queue, Councillor Race. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did speak to our administration about a mistake on the November 29th minutes. Just wondering if that has been corrected.
CEO Panasic.
Yes, it has.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any further questions or debate? Seeing nothing, I will call to question. All those in favor? That also passed unanimously. That'll bring us to our citizens minute with council. It's an opportunity to bring forward any thoughts, concerns, and just please state your name. Seeing none. That'll bring us to our action items, as we do not have any delegations or presentations for this afternoon. 6.1 West Area Structure Plan Amendment Bylaw 1117-1 CAO Panasic.
Through the mayor, members of the council, I will turn this directly over to Ms. Walker to present.
Thank you, CAO Panasic, and good evening, council. Yes, this evening we are looking for first reading on West Area Structure Plan Amendment number 1117. This is with regards to an application we received, from a planner on behalf of a developer for a portion of the golf course lands, as has been identified under Figure 5, which is the proposed area of the development. And what we're looking for tonight is just first reading in order to be able to get this advertised and for us to be able to send out circulation to adjacent neighbors and to get some feedback prior to public hearing. The evening of public hearing, which is proposed to be scheduled for January 17th, I believe. We will be having a delegation of the planning company on behalf of the developer, which at that time will be able to share some more detail with regards to the concept plan. Right now, it's just high level. So we're just looking to get these couple amendments completed within the West ASP, which, as you see there, is the map, as well as the table on Schedule 3, which is going to be just updating some of those statistics around the residential and the commercial type development that they are proposing. And that's it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Walker. I have Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the council give the West Area Structure Plan number 1117-1 first reading, and that council direct administration to schedule a public hearing on January 17th, 2023 at 4 p.m. in the council chambers to hear public comments on bylaw number 1117-1. And if I may speak to that briefly, I think most people in the community are aware in some way, shape, or form that this has been discussed, and this is something that's evolving. For those people who maybe haven't, I think the most exciting thing to point out is at the bottom of page 19 of the report. And that's the fact that this potential development, it looks to include and integrate areas along the golf course lands with hotel, retail shops, conference centers. Really, this is going to be a potential boon for our community in terms of diversifying our economy. And I think, again, looking to put Hinton on the highway corridor map. So I'm pretty excited about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate, questions? And seeing none, I'll simply call to question that council give the West Area Structure Plan Bylaw 1117-1 first reading, and that council direct administration to schedule a public hearing on January 17th, 2023 at 4 p.m. in the council chambers to hear public comments on Bylaw 1117-1. All those in favor? That is passed unanimously. Council, anything further for action item 6.1 this afternoon? In the queue, please. Sorry, Councillor Taylor. You did. There we go. Okay. No, should be good now. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say again that this is the kind of development I think we need for the future as our town moves to probably the next phase of its development, which might be the tourism industry coming up as the communities of, say, Cochrane, Crow's Nest Pass, Canmore have done. The resource extraction industries aren't going to last forever, so something has to replace that. And here's one good start at what may happen to replace that in the near future, or maybe even the 10 to 20 year future. I'll turn that off right away. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, anything further for 6.1? Seeing none, thank you, administration and council. For that, that'll bring us to 6.2, our reserve replacement, CAO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor, to the rest of council. So we're bringing this forward today in order to request a carryover approval for $298,672 to be funded from the operating reserve restricted surplus. A little bit of background on this: on September 6th, a regular meeting at council, council made a motion in order to approve that $812,800 was to be authorized from that restricted surplus. This is a protected conversation as per Division 2, Part 1 of FOIP, specifically sections 24 and 17. So we can't get into those details, but we are providing an update to council and a request that 412 also be motioned to put back into the restricted reserves, as those funds will no longer be needed.
Thank you, CAO Panasic. Council, what would we like to do with this item? Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the council agrees to carry forward the $298,672 to be funded from the operating reserves restricted surplus into the 2023 operating budget, and that $412,128 to be placed back into operating reserves restricted surplus. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any questions or debate? Councillor Taylor.
I'm happy to vote for this. I'm just questioning whether there's a need before or after this for an update in closed session.
CAO Panasic.
Through the mayor, it is actually on our closed session agenda today to provide an update on this topic.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to support the proposed direction that's been put forward. I was very happy to find out that of the $812,800 that was originally budgeted for the municipal restructuring, but more than half of it is not going to be required to undertake the municipal restructuring. And that number may be reduced even further as we move forward through 2023. So very happy to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. For myself, I'll be supporting this. I do want to thank the community for their patience. I know this is a huge expenditure in going through this. I think there were lessons learned, but I'm happy that the information came forward. We were able to share the premise of this and to put back half of the funds as was alluded to earlier. I think give some ease to the community on what happened on September 6th. So I think we're in a better place today. And again, thank the community for their patience in getting the much deserved information that should be public presented today. Councillor Taylor.
Can you refresh me? What's section 24 again?
Through the mayor to members of council. So I believe section 4 is in regards to advice from officials, and it comes from restructuring and employment type activities as well.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, any further debate or questions? Seeing none, I'll call to question that council agrees to carry forward $298,672 to be funded from operational reserves restricted surplus into the 2023 operating budget, and that $412,128 be placed back into operating reserves restricted surplus. Council, all those in favor? That is passed unanimously. Council, any further questions or directions for 6.2? Seeing none, thank you, administration and council. Moving along to 6.3, our 2023 capital budget, CAO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor, through the rest of council. So I will turn this over to our Director of Corporate Services, but before I do, and for the benefit of the public, the recommended action that we are proposing here today from administration is that council approve the 2023 capital budget and the 23 to 2027 capital plan as presented. And that is just to in accordance with the MGA to pass a 5-year capital budget. With that, I will pass that along to Ms. Bourbeau.
Thank you. Good evening, council. First, before I get started, I would like to offer all of council my apologies. I truly learned what a short time frame it was between committee on the 29th to having the information in the package for council this evening. I grabbed a couple of the wrong files, and so the original documentation that went out had some inaccuracies in my typing. So for that, I do apologize. So on the capital budget, the same total cost of $69,155,095 has been carried across to represent a plan for capital project in 2027. Acknowledging this and moving forward with this evening does not bind council in any way. We can make any changes or adaptations as we move throughout the year and future years. It simply is a document that administration can use to ensure that they're bringing the correct items to council. We went through the plan that had been adopted on December 7th, 2021, and we've incorporated that all into one document here for you so that we have this moving forward. The 2023 financial requirements as written out, the entire budget is $8.4 million for 2023. We anticipate being able to fund up to 65% of that through MSI or CBF, so municipal sustainability initiatives or Canada Building Fund allocations that are available to the town of Hinton. There's 1.7 million that will be carried forward from 2022 to complete projects that are ongoing. And additionally, there were some other items identified in 2023 that are very restricted and require an RFD coming back to council. Those notations have been left on this document. So again, all the information is in one place. I, from a financial perspective, have no qualms in bringing this forward to council this evening for adoption. I believe it allows administration to move forward very quickly with getting our grant applications and project plans filed with the province, as well as it allows us to be prudent in our planning, and that will allow us to utilize our resources and stretch them as far as we can. And with that, are there any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Barbeau. Council, what would we like to do? Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I just have a question. I wasn't concerned on page 28 of 43. The first paragraph simply references the fact that council had directed admin to include the basketball nets, tennis court upgrades down at Harry Collins. In retrospect, and this is my fault, I never asked this previously, which line item on that big capital plan sheet does that reference? Is it the one that says tri sport court? Okay, that's all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, I'd like to move that council approve, and I want to get this correct, so it's approve the 2022 capital budget. No, 2023 capital budget and 2023 through to 2027 capital plan as presented. Anybody speak to it? This was a great process, having those 2 days to go through each of these line items and discuss them. It's also showed great fortitude looking into the future, what we need to look at with our infrastructure. Looking at the pipes was a scary event, but looking forward to getting those things up to code and fixed up, and then we have more to look at too. So I'm confident in this capital budget, and it's moving our community forward and fixing up some of those areas and getting started on that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, we have a direction on the floor. Any further debate, questions? Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the big sheet that we just received under aquatic center upgrades, that $28 million, that's from is that from a conversation maybe 4 years ago? I'm just wondering about that figure.
Through the chair to all of council, that was taken from the approved capital plan that council adopted in December of 2021. It was one of the line items, and we simply transferred all of that information onto one document and look forward to working through that if there's any required changes in the future.
Okay. So my thinking is that, 2 years have passed. Is that a realistic figure for that rec center? And then I noticed that the plan for 24 all the way up to 27, is that additional funding to be put into that, or what are those numbers?
Through the chair to all of council. So your total, my colleague is the 28 and then the 28,500,000. And then we've allocated approximate values of that 28 million and how we would potentially see that those funds being needed. So that line adds across backwards to be the total cost.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council, any further debate or questions? I'll be speaking in favor of this. I do want to thank administration, obviously, for putting together what I believe to be a great budget process. I do want to thank council too, going through our consensuses to make sure that the democracy is followed in going through all the projects and deciding what we want in our capital budget. I believe was a great process. And at the end of the day, I think this best represents our entire council, and I look forward to supporting this. I now have Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to express my appreciation first to council for those times when I was away in the past month with work, or working through those budgetary meetings. That was, I just appreciate everything that you did. And I'd like to extend my deepest appreciation to administration. I think the process has been really top notch, very, very fluid, very easy to understand and transparent. And to our town manager, again, hats off, because it's never easy just coming into an organization in the middle of budget season and saying, okay, well, let's do this. So thanks a lot. Thanks for the flexibility, and it's deeply appreciated.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Council, anything further before I call this to question? Seeing none. I'll call it to question that council approve the 2023 capital budget and 2023 through 2027 capital plan as presented. Council, all those in favor? That is passed unanimously. Council, anything further for 6.3 2023 capital budget? Seeing none, thank you, administration and council. That'll bring us to section 6.4, our 2023 operational budget. CEO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. So administration is recommending that council approve, including the request for funding from the West Yellowhead Community Futures in the 2023 operating budget. So I will refer council to page 40 of their package. And this was my mistake, council. This came in shortly after I had started and I did not forward it along. So I will take the brunt of this one. But as a part of our civic agency ask, the community future should have been a part of that. They have requested funding from council in the amount of $10,000, 500 coming for the Lemonade Day sponsorship, $1,000 for the Youth Entrepreneurs and Training Initiative, $2,000 for the Women's Entrepreneurship Event, $1,500 for the Small Business Continuity and Disaster Recovery Project, and $5,000 for the follow-up on the West Yellowhead Triage Business and Retention Project.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. Council, any questions, directions? What would we like to do with 6.4? Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I would move that council does not approve the funding request for the West Yellowhead Community Futures in the 2023 budget. And I guess the reason for that would be that I see these tasks, projects that are listed here as more federal government priorities, not necessarily town of Hinton priorities that come from our strategic plan. So I would prefer to me, they're not priorities for the town of Hinton that way. I would prefer that the $10,000 gets spent on the town of Hinton priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, we have a direction on the floor. I'll give Miss Davy Campbell a moment to bring that up. And Councillor Taylor, are you good with that wording?
Yes.
Okay. Council, we have a motion on the floor. I have Councillor Hawes.
Yeah, I guess I got a couple of questions. I mean, I'm familiar with the Lemonade Day sponsorship, what I think is great. I know the group has talked about the Youth Entrepreneurs and Training Initiative in the past. I'm just curious, is there any details on the Small Business Continuity and Disaster Recovery Project? And also the follow-up on the West Yellowhead Triage Business and Retention? Just is administration familiar with any details on those two projects and the benefit that would hold for our community in Hinton?
Administration.
Through the mayor to members of council, I am not intimately familiar with what these projects are, other than what they have provided in the funding request report, which would help or the findings from those would assist in further identifying challenges being faced by our business communities, as well as potential opportunities and strategies for moving forward. But my apologies, I'm not able to speak on the details of those unless one of my colleagues can help me out with that.
So if I may follow up real quickly, I won't be speaking in favor of this. The community futures have done a lot for our community in a lot of different ways. I guess the only thing that I would have is potentially, if that's possible, to put this kind of as a contingency as to, it would be nice to hear from community futures representatives just to discuss a little bit of this, to understand where that money is being directed towards and what the programs look like and the benefits to the town of Hinton. And I'm fairly confident that it would be a benefit in some way to it, but it's just, I guess, not knowing that makes it a little more difficult to earmark this at this time, unless there's more information that comes forward during this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to speak quickly to Councillor Hawes's questions about the small business continuity and disaster recovery project and the follow-up on West Yellowhead triage business and retention. As council representative at Community Futures West Yellowhead, I can shed a little bit of light on some of that, those two things. The small business continuity and disaster recovery project is to undertake first steps towards coming up with a strategy and potential funding that Community Futures could have to assist the business community in the event of a natural disaster in one of their communities. That stems from learnings from the Chatham wildfire in Jasper, and how the citizens of Jasper were well supported with information on what to do and where to go and how to deal with it. But the business community, there was virtually nothing. So that was a gap that was observed by Community Futures, and something that they felt was would be needed in communities like ours in the event that there is some type of natural disaster like that, and to be able to support the business community after. And the follow-up on West Yellowhead triage business and retention program. Council granted some initial funding to initiate the triage business and retention study. And I don't recall when exactly that was, but council did approve some funding to get that started. This is the follow-up to it. And the reason this is important, it's doing an analysis of the impact of COVID on our business community and what needs to be done to help our businesses to be able to efficiently and effectively recover from it. This follow-up is important because it's going to be the information that both Community Futures and the town of Hinton need to show where the areas are that our business community requires support moving forward. Not getting this follow-up after we took the initial steps to undertake the triage activity would be a mistake, in my opinion. This is the closure to find out what's needed to help our business community effectively recover. So I hope that helps out a little bit in what those two items are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Councillor Stash. That definitely does, enlighten me on that. And the fact that we've already invested in the triage business and retention, I agree. If we don't fund, then the follow-up, what was the point to the first? It wouldn't make much sense that way. So I definitely won't be speaking in favor of the motion then. I think these are all valid. And again, Community Futures, and it's not just for Hinton, it's other areas as well, but it benefits our community a great deal. And I think it is part of our strategic plan in regards to retention and businesses and customer service as well. And that's what Community Futures is all about, and a great partner. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Councillor Ostashik, can you speak to is Community Futures reaching out to all of their, like Jasper, the Park, Edson, the hamlet of Grand Cache, and requesting the same amount from all of them?
Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could respond directly to Councillor Race's question. There is a $10,000 request of all the member municipalities that are part of Community Futures West Yellowhead.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor LaBerge.
In addition to Councillor Ostashik, I sit as a representative with Community Futures as well. And I think something that warrants some comment and where this came from is and maybe this isn't our issue particularly, but they haven't had an increase in funding in 14 years. So they continue to do things for the community. The triage study is a significant undertaking. They continue to do these things without having, and I don't disagree that some of this stuff may be the purview of the federal government, but it's not available. And that's why these particular items were identified separately. And our Community Futures has gone back to each of the communities to look for that funding to allow these things to happen.
Thank you, Councillor LeBerge. I'll be speaking against this for that exact point. Prairie Scan, formerly WD, hasn't increased that funding. So to incur and have to operationally incur the inflation over every year and last year being so heavily and being limited on how to transfer monies into operation, they're caught in a position where it's very, very challenging for them. I would like to see a long-term approach, like what's going to happen in the next 2, 3, 4 years. Do we want to fund this? I think there are opportunities for the board to discuss on a long-term approach, but for this 1 year for an organization that does so much for our community, I think this is a small part we can play to help them alleviate some of the pressures they feel while continuing the great work they do. Council, anything further before I call this to question? Councillor Taylor.
Seems to me we don't normally approve $10,000 without a presentation or more detailed information on each one of the tasks. Did I miss it? Did Community Futures come and present to us? I can't remember.
CEO Panasic, any?
Through the mayor to members of council, Community Futures hasn't presented during my time here, and I'm not sure if they have presented prior to. It looks like it's not. Through the mayor, if I could speak to that a little bit, once again, I'll take some responsibility on this one because they sent this request to me on November 1st. If I had forwarded this on appropriately, we would have requested the fact that they come in and provide a presentation. So I don't want to hold that against this group for my mistake, but if council would like that presentation, we can make this contingent on a presentation, and administration can organize something at a future committee of the whole for Community Futures to come in, present, and possibly provide some more details on this ask, if that's the desire of council.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, that's fine. I just don't have enough information on this as well to vote for it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, I'll start with a point of information. Just a request. Does the motion on the floor meet the threshold for being essentially a negative motion?
Yes. CEO Panasic.
Jen, if you could watch that. I don't have my glasses on.
And if I could just speak to it while they're doing that, Mr. Mayor, I mean, we'll deal with it one way or the other by way of a positively affirmed motion or not. Doesn't matter. I just don't want to vote on something that you know what I mean, in terms of proper legislative procedure.
Mayor, through members of council, I believe that was the motion that was put on the floor by Councillor Taylor, was that we do not approve the $10,000 funding.
If I could follow up to the town manager, is that I'm okay with voting on that. I just want to make sure that we're okay to vote on that wording of does not approve. Does that sort of meet the criteria for a negative motion, or it's okay to vote on that?
Through the mayor, members of council, no, I think that's clear direction that we're not approving that request. Yeah.
If I may speak to it just briefly then, Mr. Mayor, I won't be speaking in favor of the motion on the floor. We have two councillors who are serving on that committee who I trust their reports. Community Futures West Yellowhead is an organization that we have been partnered with for a very, very long time. They've done a lot of good work in our community. In this case, I'm very willing to take the advice of our fellow counselors and the fact that this is a very well reputable organization coming before us for, what is essentially a reasonably small request. As Councillor Labarge had mentioned, especially considering that they, rarely come to us with requests for increases over, the last 15 years approximately. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, anything further before I call this a question? Seeing none, call to question. The council does not approve including the request for funding from West Yellowhead Community Futures in the 2023 operating budget. All those in favor? Opposed? That is defeated. And I guess question for CEO Panasic, because I did share some concerns with the negative motion approach. Do we now need another motion in order to include it into the budget, or does that suffice?
Through the mayor to members of council, we can do it one or two ways. We could make a motion to include it, and then we can pass the budget with it, just for a matter of process. And so council's aware the budget, the operating budget that you have in front of you does have the $10,000 included for community futures. So if we pass the operating budget, we also by default approve this $10,000 request from community futures.
Okay, so for clarification, if there's a motion passed, community futures 10,000 will be included. Perfect. Thank you. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I'd like to move the council approve including the request for funding from West Yellowhead Community Futures in the 2023 operating budget. I could speak to it quickly. I feel that the work that Community Futures does is valuable to our community, and that the minimal ask is very likely going to be returned multiple times over through the work that they do to support the future entrepreneurs and current businesses in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, just quickly, I'll be speaking in favor of this for those very reasons. This is an organization that has done a lot for our community and surrounding communities. And this, I think, is a small amount, that benefits our business communities in Hinton. So I'm strongly in favor of this.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, anything further before I call this a question? Seeing none. Call to question that council approve, including the requests for funding from West Yellowhead Community Futures in the 2023 operating budget. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. One other thing, now that the funding for Community Futures has been approved, our other civic agency partners do have to submit to some diligence testing and reporting requirements and become partners in the civic agency partnership policy. I wouldn't expect any less of Community Futures, so I would like to make a motion, please. I'll take a stab at it, but I might need some assistance from administration to wordsmith it. But motion would be to direct administration to consult with CFWY and if there will be an ongoing financial request from the town of Hinton that they comply with the requirements of the civic agency partnership policy, I believe is the wording. I already spoke to it in the preamble to the motion, so thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. I'll turn it over to council.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, my initial thinking on that is that it seems a bit bureaucratic that they should have to do that. I mean, a lot of the other agencies that had gone through that scrutiny are more informal groups that have gone from having no standing to having some sort of standing. So yeah, you know, like Pathway to the Park, you have to have a civic agency agreement and you have to be an incorporated society. And most of them are that way. So it makes sense that they have to do a civic agency policy. This organization has been in existence for 20 to 30 years. We've given this organization regularly money for things that we've agreed to with them. And I'm not sure what extra protection we get from adding a civic agency requirement. But to me, they're a pretty solid organization that's been there for quite a period of time, and civic agency agreement doesn't add anything to that. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I have a question for CEO Panasic, I believe. If hypothetically there's ongoing funding for, let's say, 5-10 years, from a high level perspective, would an organization with the structure of Community Futures potentially fall within the civic agency guidelines?
Through the mayor, I will refer this to Ms. Juke, who has a better understanding of that particular policy.
Thank you. Through mayor to council, I believe yes. In cases where the town of Hinton is a member already of an agency, or it's a club or an association that the town is a member of, then that would not be the case. For example, Yellowhead Regional Library would be one case where our funding is flowing to them, but they wouldn't need to meet civic agency requirements. But this is a different one, and since it is an agency that serves the residents of Hinton, I think it would be appropriate that they become a civic agency.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Hawes.
Thank you for that administration, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll speak in favor of this on that information alone, but we do expect it from other agencies that we're providing some funding. We may not be fully funding them. So I think it only reasonable that they meet the same standards as everyone else. I think it would be unfair not to. They have great standing. I'm confident now with administration's recommendation that they would fit. So I'm in favor of this.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Just to clarify my opinion on whether they qualify as civic agency or not, I believe they would fall under category number 1, which is intergovernmental agency partnership. Partnerships that exist or are developed between the municipality and other government bodies. So the reason one of the reasons, there's multiple reasons why I think that they should be a civic agency partner. All of the partners that the town works with to fund initiatives for the greater public good in our community all have to adhere to the same reporting requirements and conditions of the partnership policy. And one of the things that I would like to see if we're funding them even partially is that they do come before council and report on their doings throughout the year and how that funding was utilized. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council, and anything further before I call this to question? Seeing none, I'll call to question to direct administration to consult with Community Futures West Yellowhead. And if it will be an ongoing financial request from the town of Hinton that they comply with the requirements of the civic agency partnership policy. Council, all those in favor? That is passed unanimously. Council, what would we like to do with the operating budget 2023? Anything further? Any questions? Any directions for this evening or a future date? Councillor LaBerge. Oh, my apologies here.
Actually, I'm going to stand down.
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge. Councillor Taylor.
I just have a question if I could, please. Probably for administration. I've kind of noticed that we haven't talked about the utility rate increases when we talk about the budget increases. And I sense from the November 18th session I was at that the utility rate increases look like they're going to be 7.6%. So if we don't talk about the utility rate increases while we're doing the budget, does that reduce our flexibility when we talk about the utility rate increases later? Like then our options for what we can do if we've approved the budget already are kind of more limited?
CO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council. So the budget should be a reflection of the policy or the fees that we've implemented for the utility rates. I'm looking to Ms. Bourbeau to hopefully shed a little bit of light on when a decision was made on the utility rates.
The mayor to member of council, there was a bylaw passed that had I believe increases for a 4-year term. Off the top of my head, I do not recall the time period. The numbers reflected in the budget that for you were prepared by that department. So I have faith that they are correct. There is some anomaly through the actual monies that we will be contributing to the West Yellowhead Regional Landfill Authority. Those still need to be sourced out in their entirety. And if I may expand on that further, passing of the budget at this point in time allows you to remain compliant with the Municipal Government Act, as it says that we must have either the budget passed or an interim budget in place before January 1st of the operating year. But that doesn't mean that there is no room for any changes. Administration can, once we get questions from, I understand there's some operational questions with one of our large contracts that we pay out, and the report is coming to council later after this meeting. We also have the questions in regards to the Yellowhead Regional Landfill, and they're still sourcing out and working on their budgets. As well, we don't have our final assessment data for the 2023 tax year. So it's very common practice in my experience for administration to return to council at the end of Q1 or early in Q2, when some of these other operation anomalies have had an opportunity to be addressed and sourced out and more concrete information sought, and bring an amendment suggestion to council for the budget. So passing tonight does not seal it, no changes, force council's hand for the entire operating year of 2023.
Thank you, Ms. Bourbeau. Councillor Taylor. Councillor LaBerge.
I have a follow-up on that then. So this in excess of 7% increase was a scheduled rate increase, or are we expecting to collect more in utilities than we did last year because of an expansion in the number of accounts we're collecting from? It seems like an awfully big increase, an annual increase to have been approved, I don't know, some period of time ago, and that, in excess of 7% was the impact on the budget this year. Just seems like a big number. And then I guess to follow up on the discussion or the comments that you just made, Ms. Bourbeau, is sure we can make those adjustments later on, but we're going to go to people and tell them how much taxes we're going to take out of their account this year. And I think once it's approved, that's done. Is that not the case?
Ms. Bourbeau.
Through the chair to all of council. Firstly, I'll address your utility. Off the top of my head, I am not recalling the exact composition of those numbers, but I can certainly look into it and respond to all of council with that. My apologies, I just don't recall that total composition. And as far as your second question, we have talked a lot about taxation in regards to the budget process, because that's a very large component of it. But it's definitely two sides and it's somewhat separate. So when you say, does administration want to be able to come back time after time and say, oh, we need to amend the budget, please, council, can you look at this? No, absolutely not. But I do believe there's a critical period of time between January and the end of March when we're finding out our actual assessment data because it's being audited by the province at that time. When we have those opportunities to reach out to some of the individuals that we do business with who are in the exact same process that we are now, is working on their draft budgets and planning for the 2023 year, and get more concrete information and further solidify the numbers that we know to be more accurate for the full year, and to bring all of those combined to one report, one presentation saying, okay, these are the adjustments based on information from the RCMP meeting and the report that's coming forward from the further solidification of the West Yellowhead Regional Landfill budget. For any of the other items, the looks for the utility and ensuring that the budgeted numbers align with the bylaw, and the fees that are in the bylaw are represented accurately within the budget. All of that can come in one report, and it's that time we again talk about the tax rate. Council also has the opportunity at any time while we, even though the budget's been passed, to suggest to administration to look for further cuts within the budget, but again, not to be bringing them back one at a time, but in one full amendment report.
Thank you, Ms. Borbo. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to take a crack at something and see if there's council support. Jen, so I'll just try and go slow, but I'm going to make a motion that council direct administration to adjust the draft budget tax rate to 3.9% with funding to be taken by reducing contributions to reserves. And first, Mr. Mayor, if I can get clarification on the motion, I want to make sure that it achieves the objective. Administration, we've been talking over the last couple of budget meetings about the potential possibility of adjusting contributions to reserves and having that offset the overall tax rate. Will this motion accomplish that? If it won't, then I'll have to take it off the floor. I just want to make sure it's in the right ballpark.
CEO Panasi.
Through the mayor to members of council, I believe what we are comfortable with that amendment. If we're putting it on the floor to approve with that amendment, we can certainly do that. And essentially that will come in the form of a reduced expenditure because contributions to the reserves are an expenditure. So we would reduce it to the appropriate amount. I don't have the exact dollar amount right off the top of my head, but I'm looking 260.
Approximately.
Okay, so we'd be looking at about a $260,000 reduction in the expenditures that would get the municipal tax rate down to the 3.9%. So we can pass the budget with that amendment if that's council's wish.
Thank you, CAO. And I guess then just to speak to it briefly, Mr. Mayor, there's been some discussion amongst council about to what degree or not they support this. So I wanted to throw it out there, see if there's general support for it, and we can take it from there.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, we have a motion on the floor, and I have Councillor LaBerge.
I like the intent of what's going on, but I won't speak in favor of it for two reasons. And I think Councillor Stashik sort of hit the nail on the head the last time is that if if we're in fact going to use a reduction in contributions to capital reserves or to reserves, that can only be used for one-time or short-term funding. Or else, what we need to say to taxpayers is really that whole contribution to reserves is just whatever we can get around to putting in the bank after we've paid for all the bills, which leads to my second comment. I don't think we've worked hard enough to try and take some expense out of this budget. I mean, for me, I've talked to an awful lot of people, and I haven't come across very many people that are happy with a 6% tax increase. Businesses have suffered, and it's a big imposition. And you know, I've heard comments, well, it's only $80 a household or $70 a household. But when we're talking about a contributor the size of West Fraser, that's a big number. And I would like to have a discussion as it relates to the RCMP. I'd like to have it before we pass the budget. And I would like to sort of figure out how we don't spend, like we spent almost everything that was asked for, we approved in this budget. Now we say, well, we'll reduce the contributions to reserves to get to a level where we're comfortable, which I don't know. I think it takes some of the responsibility off of us. And I would just like to see that ultimate number come down first before we do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I'm not necessarily opposed to having a conversation around this item. At this moment, though, I can't support the proposed motion. Councillor LaBerge alluded to it, and I alluded to it at our last budget discussion. I would need to know what the offsetting operational expenses would be before I could agree to this. If there were enough one-time operational expenses that were only going to happen in 2023 and wouldn't exist in 2024, then I could potentially get behind this. But my sticking point, though, is if some of the there aren't enough one-time operational expenses to offset this year, we're automatically looking at a tax increase in 2024 just to be able to maintain service levels, because those operational expenses are going to carry on and the contribution to reserve has to be made back, in my opinion. A one-off where we're not contributing as much as we normally would to reserves, I can stomach, but doing it on an ongoing basis, I can't. I think it's important that our reserves are properly funded and that they're properly built up so that they can be utilized at some point in the future when we need to do something with our infrastructure and minimize the amount that we need to borrow to do that. So, like I said, I'm happy to, or I would be content to have the conversation, but at this point, I can't support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So administration, can anyone give a figure as to how much we may be able to contribute to?
Through the mayor to members of council. So I would say that that's really at the direction of council. You know, it was we'll say a practice or a goal to be right in around that $3 million mark. We have reduced it by what we could identify as one-off expenditures. I don't know if I can identify additional one-time expenditures off the top of my head here today to get it down an additional 260,000. So, you know, I would say that is to the discretion of council of how much we do want to put in. I'll certainly say that it is administratively speaking important that we do have adequate reserves in order to fund our infrastructure when we need to do that. I'll also say that, you know, this is it's a compounding effect. You know, we have been able to keep our tax rates very low for quite a few years with 3 years of no increase, that does compound. And in a year like this with hyperinflation on top of that compounding issue of not increasing your taxes year over year, it does come to the reality of having to make larger jumps. I would say that comparatively speaking, we are okay even at the 5.9%, just comparatively speaking with other communities around us. I'm not saying that it isn't easy to swallow because it is a tough pill. It is a larger increase than the town has seen in some years, but I guess that's my roundabout answer of saying, it's a difficult balancing act for council, but.
May I continue? So I asked that question because I keep hearing that $3 million being tossed around and I'm going, where is that $3 million? I'd like to see it. So, but I hear what you're saying. My other question is, if we delay decision tonight until after we hear from the RCMP on the 13th, that's not the end of the world, is it?
Through the mayor to members of council, certainly isn't the end of the world. Administration's preference would not be to tie one to the other. This once again is a process and we absolutely will have that decision to be made. But, if we get into what I don't want to get into is trying to rush all these decisions in order to pass something, because then we'll have one more kick at the can in order to pass a budget. And then unfortunately, we'll be in a position of administration saying, well, we have to pass something here today, or we can't leave because we have to pass something before the end of the year. So you never want to get into that. So, as Ms. Bourbeau had mentioned before, budgets passed before the end of the year are still subject to change, right? But what we're passing is what we know today. And from what I've seen from the team, I'm confident in the numbers based on what I know today. Now, there are some unknowns that will need to be addressed. That could be through our review of enforcement services could affect this budget and therefore the tax rates. And that could affect it either way, right? There's still retroactive pay that we may have to deal with in 2023. So it could go either way. Waste management is still a question. There are a few other unknowns, I suppose, that we will need to address in the new year. But I don't think that should stop council from passing a budget based on what we know. And if what we have here, the content that we have here is what you would like to accomplish, or that's the ends that we want to accomplish as an organization, then passing it here today and looking in the new year to making these adjustments, I think is preferable from administration's perspective.
So just one more. So if new information were to come to us, let's say in February, March, when the assessment reports come back and it's in our favor, we have more money coming than we expected, then we can revisit this operating budget.
Through the mayor to council race, absolutely. Yeah. And any change that are made or adjustments one way or the other, that will affect the tax rate that we will need to have changed prior to passing that bylaw. And because it would be later on in the year in Q1, that would be thoroughly communicated to the community.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Race. I wanted to follow up. I believe CEO Panasic, you spoke to this a bit, but for me, this is a big decision. I think there's a few ways that I support. One being this, I don't want a 5.9% increase. I believe our reserves in our debt ratio is a very, very healthy one. And I believe future taxpayers should pay a fair portion of future developments that are not yet. So it's finding that balance. I know that's challenging. My question though, without affecting services or service levels, does administration believe you can go back and find any dollars within this budget in order to trim down that amount? Because for me, that plays a big role in deciding whether I want to task administration and finding efficiencies or anything, or moving on and deciding on the number that I believe are palatable for businesses and residents who have to incur inflation on top of this increase. So any comment on the efficiencies without changing services whatsoever?
Through the mayor to members of council. So I can say that that exercise has happened within administration, and then again and again. And we've actually gone back numerous times as administration trying to refine this to what we call the bare bones base budget of what we could provide. So at this time, I don't think we'd be able to identify additional reductions without affecting services, because we have worked with what we have so far in bringing this budget forward, and we have done it numerous times. So I don't know if we would be able to accomplish it. Certainly not to 260,000.
Thank you for that. Councilor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, in a lot of ways, the CEO's previous comments highlight exactly why I'd like to pass this tonight. There does not prevent, nothing with this motion prevents us from continuing the work of looking for efficiencies or continuing those budgetary conversations from now until the new year, and finding potential savings, whether they be council driven or whether they be through reports that appear before council. I know, the big one for discussion has been protective services. We've heard, multiple councilors bring that up. At that point, when we find those efficiencies, it's certainly possible to redirect those savings back into reserves. I simply know that, in my discussions with citizens right now that, 5.9% is difficult to discuss with folks, that there's got to be a bit of a compromise there. And so again, there's no reason why we can't get the budget moving, find some efficiencies, continue to do the homework, as a number of councilors have mentioned, but then redirect those savings if and when they're found over to reserves as an example. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Councilor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess for me, I'm not opposed to this currently. My worry is, and I'm worried that we keep trying to do low taxes. And as CEO Panasic mentioned, keeping them low is fine, but eventually it catches up to us, and it's caught up to us. It's, and I don't think we're doing any favors to our citizens by keeping them low for that very reason. As we heard from our CEO, our services are costing what they're costing. There is no more unless we start to cut those services. Now, I am hoping that service level review builds on more consistency with services and maybe find some efficiencies and savings, but keeping our taxes low is just, it's shown in the past. It comes back to haunt us, and that's where we're at right now. And unfortunately, we're at a place of a perfect storm with inflations and costs going up, and it's going up for us as well. So, I mean, if council wants to put away less money, again, there's another opportunity for when we need that money, it's gone. It's not there. And that's where I'm struggling with. I mean, am I happy with close to a 6%? No, but we did challenge our administration to go away and say no more than 6%. And from what I've gathered, prior to CEO Panasic and afterwards, I have gone to the table many times, and they've done that. They've done that with also building efficiencies into our budget, with improvements in infrastructure and fixing that, improvements in our the business, everyday business that we do. We've improved that, and they've tasked us with, and they met that task, which isn't common. Usually it's more than that. So I'm still okay, honestly, with what it is, but I would be potentially is cutting it in half at a 5% rather than a 3.9%, and still taking that from reserves. And that to me is a compromise. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Haas. Councilor Taylor.
Yeah, it's true. We've had a number of years of low tax increases, and there's been a few things that have made up for that in the past. But we've had a few years of low tax increases, and we've also been able to bring the debt down since 2013. The debt's gone down substantially. The reserves have gone up substantially. If you look at the consolidated financial statements and you look at revenues and expenses, they have matched each other. They have not gone out of sync. If you look at the net amortization of capital assets, and you look at the amount of grants we've been getting on an annual basis, at least for the last 5 years, you'll find that we're putting in more to reserves than that deficit suggests. So it suggests to me, and then you look at this budget situation, we found out we had $8 million sitting in a MSI and a capital building fund that nobody on council, I don't think, thought that we had. So I don't think, we've had a number of years of zero increase, but we've had things that have compensated for that, like the agreement with Yellowhead County and some other things. So that hasn't financially set us back. In fact, I don't think financially we've looked as good as we have right now. So that seems to be a reasonable thing to me. I'll probably vote for it. My preference would be that, like Albert, we have a way to make up the $260,000, and I'm not quite as restrictive as Councillor Ostashkik. If we could make that 260 up in a 2 or 3 year period of time with some RCMP things next week, I'd be happy with that as well. My preference, like Councillor Labarge, is to wait 2 weeks till we can hear more information on a topic that could impact our decisions, and then make the decision on December 20th. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First off, I want to start with good news that I'd like to share with everybody who's listening. Right now, our reserves are sitting at over $15 million in restricted and unrestricted funds. Our debt is under $5 million. Listening to our CAO, it sounds like we're in a position to continue to fund our reserves. But here's what's happening out in the community. That was the good news. Out in our community, the gas prices are high, electricity is high, inflation is high, the food prices are high. And they're saying next year food prices are continuing to go high. I spent time the last few days talking to people downtown, and this 6% increase, I'll tell you, it's going to hit them hard. And then thank you to Councillor Laberge. Now I concern myself with people who have businesses. And before that, I only concentrated on the citizens. I talked to some businesses, and at 6%, man, that's going to hit them hard. Just because they have a building does not mean they got money, but they're doing good. So it's hard out there. So I'm saying right now, I will definitely support this. I will. Next year, we may have to come in with a higher tax rate, but this year, I feel we are in a position to give our citizens a break. And especially with what CAO has said to us, this is not carved in stone. We can make a change in what we decide tonight. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. It made me think about, and you're correct, administration has done a lot of great work over the last couple of years to increase our grant amounts that we need to move our community forward, which makes a big difference and offsets some differences there. So that's definitely a considering part of it. And the fact that when we look at what grants are still out there and administration is looking at it, we've also included a position pretty much exclusively to seek out some of those grants for those large items as well. So based on that, I mean, I'm still amenable to this, but I just have to say, and it's on, yes, the costs of everything are going up, but we are a municipality, and a lot of those costs are out of our control, and it's extremely unfortunate. I feel them too, but we have to be careful that we don't, put ourselves at some sort of risk as well to use those, because we're also paying those fuel prices. We're also paying all those higher prices. And I know that, it's hard on the citizens, but also the items that we're purchasing, the items that keep our town going, those costs are going up, and those costs are quite high already. So I'm just, we got to be careful that we're not trying to fix a problem on the town of Hinton and our citizens based on everything else is going up. We have to consider also too how that affects us. So, but based on the fact that I would entertain this, knowing that next year might not be the same. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Magoon?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just quickly to the rest of council, the one thing I always want to try and be, especially with motions like this, is courteous to council if time is an issue. If it's the will of council to spend a little bit more time in the next couple of weeks talking about this, I'm willing to look at withdrawal, or we can vote on it tonight. Again, I don't want to ram a motion down council's throat if they feel like they need more information. The one thing I was trying to point out is that we can adjust this in subsequent meetings, which is why I was comfortable trying to bring it forward tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor LaBerge?
Thanks. Labor makes up a substantial portion of our cost base, and we locked that in at a pretty reasonable rate this year. And let's remember that we're actually not talking about 6%. We're talking about 8% because we've already taken, I think the number is 290,000 out of that capital reserve. And now we're talking about taking another $260,000 out of there. And it's just not fair to kick the can down the road. Those ongoing costs just get built into the tax base next year. And if we're comfortable passing 6%, then we pass 6%. I mean, I just think we're playing silly bugger, going back to the community and saying, well, we just won't put as much in savings this year. And it's actually 3.9. It's actually 8. And we've taken savings to pay for it. So I think it's responsible to look at it from that perspective.
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge. Councillor Taylor?
Councillor McGowan, my preference is that you withdraw it and we do this in 2 weeks after we've had next week's discussion, because that gives us a chance to talk about something that could actually save us 2% in a reasonable period of time. That's my preference, but I mean, I would probably vote for it. But then in another week's time, when the other topic comes up, and that's looking at some of these services that we have that other towns don't have, I would be looking at trying to make up that $260,000 so it's not a net loss sort of forever for the town of Hinton. That's the way I would tackle it next week. But my preference as to timing would be to take a little more time, do the thing next week, and then look at this in conjunction with next week's information, because I think we have important information coming that's going to help us with the budget. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I have myself. I'm going to speak in favor of this. I do not want to tie the RCMP conversation with deciding where we land on the budget. If I play out the scenario that we do not change the RCMP, I still don't want 5.94% increase. I still want 9.3. If any savings are done through the RCMP potentially, then that can go back into reserves. But I knowing the answer, when I play out, if there's no changes to it, I still want 3.9. I'm hearing the community, 86% of the survey said they wanted minimal to low tax impacts. They're struggling. And if we look at our balance sheet from a high level, with 4 years of zero, from 2013 to 2017, we have still positioned ourselves in our reserve to debt ratio to a position none of us would have thought we'd be in. And how does that happen? Because there were efficiencies in ways to save money. So to me, taxpayers don't want 5.9%. Many people are already living in debt, and this is just additional debt. Whatever that cost is in their living, it'll have an impact on rentals. The trickle-down effect to these increases are huge. And to me, again, on November 18th, CEO Panasic asked us a question of where did 3 million come from? Nobody knew the answer. We did not know. These are arbitrary numbers. They're not justified specifically with 100% accuracy on why we need that. And for me, to put in 2.5 million, get to 17, almost 18 million in reserves with low debt, to me, the community wants that. And then we position ourselves and future taxpayers, if a ratio of 14 million isn't enough in the positive, then we take out debentures and future taxpayers pay for these big expenditures, not just increasing our bank accounts. And when I bring up those numbers to the community, they are shocked. They cannot believe that that's our ratio. So I support this. If it goes to a future meeting, I also support that. I think we can flesh it out. But to me, indifferent of next week's conversation, 3.9%, I think is the most palatable number that I see. So those are my thoughts. And with that, I'll go to Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I'm also of similar mind. I don't want to have the RCMP discussion or policing discussion to be tied to the budget. For one thing, I think it's a big conversation and it deserves significant public input. Policing in our community is important, and what that looks like in the future, I don't feel should be rushed. I don't think it should be knee-jerk reacted. And the other concern that I have about tying the two together is several times it's been indicated by administration that there is significant lead time required to change any of the contract conditions with the RCMP. So I don't see that there's any way that the conversation we're going to have a week from now would be able to impact the 2023 budget anyway. Direction can be given to administration at some point in the future when that conversation is finished and we've gotten feedback from the community on what they want to see regarding policing in Hinton, to make changes to the RCMP contract at that point. And then that could potentially affect the 2024 budget, 2025 budget. But at this stage, I don't see how that conversation is going to have any effect on the 2023 budget. Now, that said, if the appetite of council is to get the tax rate increase down below 4%, I'll hold my nose and support this, because what I don't want to see is a reduction in services to get down below 4%. We have spent, as council and administration, a lot of time going through this budget. I feel that I know the operating budget pretty well, and there's nothing in there that I would point to right now and say, yeah, we can get rid of that, that, and that to be able to achieve a tax increase below 4%. And in fact, I actually feel that in a time where inflation is sitting 6, 7, 8%, by trying to achieve a budget that is below 4% by cutting operating budget is doing a disservice to our community. Our residents have told us they want the services that they get. Our budget survey had several respondents that said, you need to look at raising taxes. We need to make sure our community is sustainable. I look to our neighbors to the east. Edson is currently contemplating an 8.25% budget increase for 2023. And that's on top of a 5.7% increase in 2022. They're realizing the situation. They're realizing what they need to do to plan for their community's future. And I think it's imperative that we do that too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too don't want to link today's discussions with the RCMP for all the same reasons that have already been said. But one other that I want to add to is we did not approve in 2022 the $60,000 to do into the policing services of our community. It was added, but then was taken out and said that we can do that internally. And I would probably be amiss, but I'm sure that's not going to be coming to us anytime soon, probably in 2023. And without that that report that we've requested, I wouldn't be making any decisions whatsoever, even if we could a week from now, because as the other counselor said, I mean, this is a big conversation. And this is just having an RCMP coming, and this isn't discussing contracts. This isn't discussing anything. This is understanding the services we have and then looking down the road. But so I don't want to tie that at all to this. And the fact is it could be fine, and we need the services, and we need this, that funding to stay the way it is. So I too feel the similar as Councillor Stashik. I'm willing to support this, but I strongly and I've not only Edson, but I've watched other communities, and nothing is under 4% that I've seen so far. And the interesting thing is that they have kept theirs higher, similar size of ours. They kept it at about the same amount as it was last year. And so we're going, a little bit up, but every community is starting to see this. I agree with everything that everybody said. We're in great position, I think, with reserves. We're in great debt, but being in great positions, things can change quite quickly. You never know what can happen. So I will support this, yeah, I look forward to future conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, seeing no one else in queue, the last opportunity, I think we've had a lot of good dialogue. It is one of our biggest decisions that we make every year. So I think it's appropriate. Any final comments before I call this to question? CO Panasic.
Through the mayor to member of council, I know there was there's been a lot of discussion on the policing. I'll just relay to council that I'm very doubtful that we as administration will be prepared to facilitate a really good debate on that day. Just because I, as the CAO, have not even received the information from the RCMP yet. And there's a whole other subsection of the information that's required, I think, in order to make the information, and that's our side of the enforcement equation. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done on it. I agree with the comments that have been made. This is a very important discussion, but I don't know if we as administration are going to be prepared to comfortably ask council to make a decision on this prior to the end of the year.
Thank you, CO Panasic. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, the only thing I'm not going to argue, but the only thing I'd like you to maybe remember how the costs of the RCMP have gone up over the last number of years. They've gone up 2.1 million 2 years ago, and they're up in the 2.7 to 2.8 million right now. And you all know the stats on how many RCMP we have versus the surrounding towns, and what Chris Murphy said. So those kind of cost increases we have to kind of look at and address, because that's like a 35% tax increase over 2 years. It's pretty high.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, anything further before I call this to question? Seeing none, call to question that council direct administration to adjust the draft budget tax rate to 3.9% with funding to be taken by reducing contributions to reserves. Council, all those in favor?
Oh, sorry, Mayor, my mistake. Can I just ask one clarifying question on the motion in question? Is the intent to pass this motion and then to approve the budget, or is this to approve the budget with this adjustment?
Sure, Councilor McGowan, yeah.
No, the intention is thank you, sir. No, the intention is simply to adjust the draft budget, and then we would need a separate motion to pass the draft budget. I wanted to deal with them very separately, give us some flexibility potentially.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, council, again, seeing no one, I'll call to question that council direct administration to adjust the draft budget tax rate to 3.9% with funding to be taken by reducing contributions to reserves. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Council, any further direction for this item? Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the council approve the 2023 operating budget as amended. If I'd speak to it quickly. So I spoke to it a little bit during the previous discussion regarding the tax increase. There is, as I said, I'm pretty familiar with the operating budget at this point, and I feel it's important to support it as it's been presented to us. Everything in there has gone through the vetting process. It's been in front of council. Council's had the opportunity to discuss it, debate it, and has directed any changes that they wanted to see to it. And coming out of that, there, as I said there's nothing on there that I can point at that I can say, yeah, let's axe that in the interest of minimizing the tax impact on our citizens. I think everything that's in this operating budget's important to be able to set us up for success as we move forward. And that's why I'm making the motion and supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll support the motion on the floor. I am interested, though, throughout the year, if we can find some efficiencies to recoup that cost to put back into reserves. I think that, there's a lot of work to be done yet, as CEO Panasic said. We also, with services, we scraped the surface, but learned a lot from the service level review that I believe that we can still dig into and with the tactical plan and to find potentially some savings and efficiencies there as well. So I think there's room to pivot in regards to that. Because I do believe we need to, 260,000 doesn't sound like a lot in reserves, but when we look at what's coming down the pipe and what we need to take a look at, it might make a difference. But if we can find those efficiencies, make some of that money back, that'll be in our favor. So I'll speak in favor of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, any further debate or comments? Councillor Taylor. Well, you turned it off. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, I don't support that. I would prefer to have that discussion after we have next week's discussion. So I tend to disagree with some others on how the RCMP and some of our other costs fit into the budget. And I therefore would prefer to do that on the 20th after we've had next week's discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, any further debate? Questions, comments? Seeing none. Call to question that council approve the 2023 operating budget as amended. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Council, anything further? Oh, Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I have a question for administration. In the event that there are some operational efficiencies that can be realized as we move through 2023, and that results in a budget surplus, is there a policy or bylaw that directs how that budget surplus is dealt with?
Through the mayor to member of council, I'll look to Ms. Borbeau, but I believe that what we have done in the past is come to council separately to allocate those surpluses to reserves. Typically, they would be automatically just directed to an operating reserve, and then when we transferred into restricted or capital reserves, which is usually their appropriate home, we would come to council with an RFD and a report for council's consideration.
I did want to follow up, but I believe CEO Panasic was going to defer to Ms. Borbeau.
Ms. Borbeau.
Thank you, Mayor. Through to all of council, absolutely, as CAO Panasic has identified, is the process that I am used to, bringing reserves forward in a separate report for council consideration and to be allocated to the individual reserves.
If I could follow up then, Mr. Mayor. So hearing that and understanding that, I don't think that motion or direction to administration is required. But looking forward to that. Hopefully that can be achieved and we can have a report come back to us. And at that point, we can put some consideration towards taking a hoped for surplus and applying it to the reserve contributions that weren't made through the previous motion that was approved by council. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Councillor LaBerge.
And I guess then we really need to have a wholesome discussion as it relates to our reserve payments then. Because the 290,000 we've reduced taxes by with the one-time expenditures, I guess they'll fall off next year and then those will automatically flow back into reserves. But if we decide 3.1 is the right number, what we decided tonight is going to result in a 2% tax increase before we start next year. So at a 0% increase next year, we're up 2% before we start. So I think we need to have that discussion. And if that's just an amount of money, I've heard the word arbitrary. I don't know, 3.1 million we started with, took it down to 2.7. Now it's down to 2.5. So maybe it is arbitrary, but that's a ton of money. And I think we need then to have a real discussion about the amount that we're collecting and whether it's the right amount. I mean, if 3.1 was the right amount last year, 2.5 is the right amount this year, 2 million would be better next year. So I think we really need to sort of figure that out.
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, that was actually what I was going to talk about as well. Like, is that common for municipalities to have a reserve policy?
Through the mayor, members of council, yes, it is common for municipalities to have a reserve policy on how much they want to contribute into reserves and where that money is best allocated into the specific reserve accounts.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, anything further for 6.4 this evening? Seeing none, thank you, administration and council. That'll bring us to our reporting for this evening. And I will start on my right with Councillor Taylor.
Nothing to report other than it was good to see the Christmas party and how well it was attended and how well people mixed. And that to me is a good sign of the health of the town, the happy people at the Christmas party. And I had fun too. Thanks. Well, my wife asked me to dance and then I didn't have fun.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Other than attending the Christmas party and having a wonderful time, I have nothing to report.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor LaBerge.
Same, nothing to report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Like other councillors, I also attended the Christmas party and yeah, kudos to the I believe it's the social committee for planning the event. It was great. The other thing, last week we had a Community Futures Board of Directors meeting, day-long meetings to do board orientation for new members. But the agenda item that's probably the most of the most interest to council and the community was our strategic plan review, where the Community Futures went through their strategic plan and undertook an exercise with the council representatives to prioritize the things that they felt Community Futures should focus on moving forward through 2023, and some of the things that they should perhaps focus less on. Other than that, I have nothing else to report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nothing to report. Just glad to be back after some work traveling.
Very glad to have you back. Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I got to say to the social committee and the Christmas party was great. And also thanks to the venue for the service they provided as well. The food was excellent. Poutine bar, spot on. That was the new one for me and it was really good. And to the Rotary Club as well. They did an excellent job with the casino night and, you know, it was a lot of fun and a lot of dancing and a lot of good music and a lot of good conversations. So thank you to the staff for that and looking forward to next year's now and see how we can top that one. So other than that, the report, only thing that came up, I'm not sure the details, but understand there's something with the Youth Council, Advisory Council, something coming up on Thursday to present. I believe that Ms. Juke is bringing something forward to the adult administrators. So I'm interested to hear about that. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. For myself, yeah, Jen and the social committee, great job. Best Christmas party I've been to in my whole time. I know there's been a lot of kudos, but it's worth mentioning again. Absolutely the best by far. I was also able to attend the Community Future Strategic Plan with Councillor Stashik. Not much to add there. Most of the stuff status quo. The Alberta Farm Days. We're going to be looking at potential grant funding in order to fund it because it's more county related than kind of a program like Lemonade Day, which helps every area. So that was really the only major change. I was also part of the Evergreens Foundation strategic planning session. One major topic that changed and we're of benefit to that other municipalities want to see, but the Evergreens Foundation has done obviously a great job at their lodge program, providing lodges in the area, but there's an opportunity now to see partnerships in like the rapid housing in Hinton and them playing a role at managing it. The idea is there's really no better group to manage buildings like this and management style bodies that need a third party, and Evergreens is looking to step up in Hinton again. If we have another project, which the third phase for rapid housing is due by March 3rd, I believe, of 2023, and for other municipalities for future funding. But we should look at that, and it's within our mission and vision to, as an Evergreens Foundation, to be managing bodies for that. So let's take advantage of that. Let's see what projects are there. And I don't know how long that window will be open of their capacity, the Evergreens Foundation, of doing it. So we benefited first, and there's other opportunities in the future, and everything else after that pretty much stayed status quo. And we'll have future meetings in January to discuss the requisition amount. So nothing was spoken to regarding that, but I'll have more in the first quarter of 2023. And that's all for myself. CO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. So I too attended the party. Unlike everybody else, this was my first one. So that was the baseline party for which all others will be judged. But it was great to see a happy workforce and celebrating all of the organization. So I do have a little bit of a lengthy report for council today, but they are on a few key items that I think council should be aware. First of all, the Bhutan lands, 3 additional units were delivered yesterday, so they have been dropped on site. In a couple weeks, when those are tied up and ready to go, we would like to organize a tour for council to go and look at the units. So that will happen in hopefully in 2022. The infrastructure updates, the replacement sweeper has arrived and is ready for the upcoming season. In FCSS, for the rural renewal stream, the town of Hinton was approved as a designated community to participate in that stream. And we are just working through some of the requirements of that program. And we hope to be accepting applications for both businesses and immigrants in early new year, January, February. The Hinton Public Transit has experienced a recent ridership increase from 350 passengers a week to between 490 and 500 passengers. The November is Family Violence Awareness Month, so SCSS and Communications is releasing public awareness information. The Guild and Green Square are lit up with purple lights, and FCSS has partnered with the Hinton Friendship Center to raise awareness of family and domestic violence. FCSS has also partnered with the seniors at Lyons Manor in a Coal Mountain School, grade 7 classes, to run a linkages program from January to May, which connects seniors with students for sharing, connection, and learning. With the library, the service level restoration is well underway, as evidenced by their statistics, and a number of new library cards registrations have more than doubled from 2021. Library collection additions has also more than doubled in 2022 to 351 so far this year. The programs are being reestablished and participation has been robust, with nearly 200 taking part in the October's Halloween scavenger hunt. In Parks and Recreation, cold temperatures have allowed the flooding for the outdoor rinks, including the Pretzel skating loop at the campground. The Claire Jones Memorial Swim Meet took place on November 27th, bringing competitors and their families to the community. The Hinton Stingrays competed with the Town Lifeguard Club coaches and staff hosting. And the new leisure guide will be published December 1st. When it comes to corporate services, council has seen the fruits of their labor here today. Budget has been all encompassing for that department, with the audit preparation already begun for March of 2023. The tax desk is patiently awaiting additional assessment information so that supplementary notices can be sent prior to year end. Accounts payable will be sending reminders shortly regarding getting invoices approved and submitted before year end. Communications has been busy assisting with budget documentation and keeping our citizens and staff well informed of events and the happenings in our community. When it comes to protective services, we had a total of 20 calls in the last month, with 7 being alarm, 1 being suspicious substance, 10 vehicle collisions, 2 medical and resuscitation calls, and 7 inspections as well, not included in the 20 calls. They're working on their winterization of all of their apparatuses. And their year-to-date incidences are 268 so far this year in 2022, with the majority of those 40% coming from alarms and 25% from motor vehicle collisions. And an interesting stat I thought that we keep is that the busiest hour is from 11 a.m. to noon, and the busiest day is Tuesday, with the busiest month coming in October. Just a couple other points to include is the Maxwell Lake project. We did receive a grant of $140,000 from the Prairie Can, along with a ISIP grant for $250,000 for that project. The heat has been restored in both of the arenas in town. And administration through community services is working with the golf course currently on capital planning. We'll be able to present some findings and a go forward strategy on that asset in 2023. So thank you for sitting through my lengthy report.
Thank you, CO Panasic. I have Councillor Taylor.
The increased ridership in the transit means extra revenue. Has that extra revenue been worked into the budget? I mean, it's only probably 0.1%, but still it helps.
Through the mayor to members of council, I can't answer that here today. I can certainly provide you with some clarifying information if I could send that to council.
Okay. One more question, because it was so long a report. Thanks. When will the approved consolidated financial statements be ready?
Through the mayor, I will refer that to Ms. Borbeau on our audit procedure.
Thank you, and to all of council. We have been chatting with our external auditor this week. We are awaiting his listing of documents that he requires to have us prepare. We'll be going through the interim process here prior to the end of December 31st. They will be on site the week of March 21st, I believe it is, third week of March, with the report to be coming to council in April.
That seems earlier than normal. Thanks.
We are required, if I may, Mayor Michaels, we are required to have our financial statement presented to council and approved prior to and filed with the province prior to May 1st. So
Okay.
we will be meeting that
That's normal.
deadline.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor and Ms. Borbeau. Council? Seeing none, thank you, CEO Panasic, for your report. That brings us to no correspondence for this evening. Council, any notices of motion? Oh, yeah, good note. I know just prior to the meeting, our fire chief showed us his Queen's Jubilee Platinum, what is it called again? Like the Jubilee Medal, which was great to see. So I think a formal congratulations on behalf of the entire council for that. It's great to see stuff like that and recognition done within our community. So we congratulate you on your hard work and well-deserved Queen Jubilee Platinum Medal. Thank you for that, council. So notices of motion, council? None submitted. With that, I'll entertain a motion and we'll take a 7-minute recess. Councillor Hawes.
Move to go in closed session.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? That is passed unanimously. Thank you very much, everyone.